Jesus, notice what he said to this man who's been now, listen to this, 38 years in this condition, a long-standing condition. You would think at least he would say a prayer. You would think he would at least do something. You know, notice he doesn't say a prayer. He doesn't say any magic words. He doesn't wave a magic wand. He doesn't say abracadabra. He doesn't say, nothing to it other than just, what you need to be made whole. Just rise up and go. This is amazing to me. This is very profound too. If you want it, just rise up and go then. Rise, take up your bed and walk. Just get up and walk out of it. Now I'm always reluctant to say it that way. Get up and walk out of it. I'm always afraid somebody's going to think I'm talking about their marriage. I'm not saying get up out of your marriage. I'm not talking about marriage commitments here. I'm talking about physical conditions. I say, but this is the truth. He says, rise, get up, and just whatever this condition is. See, it didn't matter to Jesus that it had been there for 38 years. It didn't matter to Jesus that it is long-standing. It didn't matter to Jesus that somebody else stepped into the pool before him. None of that matters now. All that matters is, and notice this. Here's another little thought here. There's so many thoughts here. This man is looking for God to intervene, and he's missing the fact that God's already intervened. Jesus is present. Jesus is standing right next to him, but he's looking over here at the pool. See, when we've got Jesus, we've really got all we need. And his word here to this man, rise, take up your bed, walk. In other words, just get up and act like it's true. Just get up and walk out of it. That's very profound. Just get up and walk. Just go on about your business. Just get up, take up your bed and walk. So, now that Jesus has said this to him, he has got a choice, doesn't he? Did everybody hear that? He has a choice. He has a choice whether to believe or not to believe. Now, when we talk about faith and when we talk about believing, I think sometimes we get the impression that faith and believing is like some kind of a force that will come over me like a seizure, and I don't have any. Oh, now I have to believe. No, listen to me. Faith and believing is a choice. We choose to believe the Word of God. We choose. This man had a choice now whether to believe the Word of Jesus or to disregard it. See, he could have said, "What do you mean, rise, take up your bed and walk? Can't you see? Didn't you hear me say I couldn't get in the pool?" He could have. Don't you know how I feel? He could have said that. I know I care about how we feel. God cares about how we feel, but that doesn't help. Rise, take up your bed and walk. Now he's got a choice. So, thankfully, this man responded to what Jesus said. Verse 9. Immediately the man was made whole. He took up his bed and walked. The same day with the Sabbath. Now, it doesn't say it here in the text, but I would just like to say I think that this man was sitting there and Jesus is talking to him, and Jesus said, rise, take up your bed and walk. I just believe this man didn't feel any goosebumps. He didn't feel anything. Nothing seemed strange. He didn't see any weird colors. He didn't see nothing was out of the ordinary. It was just like Jesus said, rise, take up your bed and walk. And then when he chose to act on that word and get up, that's when it says he was made whole. I believe when he didn't feel any weird tingling or goosebumps or anything strange. He had to just take the bare word of Jesus and say, all right then, you said it, I believe it, that's enough for me. Immediately the man was made whole. He took up his bed and walked. The same day was the Sabbath. Now before we move on, let me just make a little broader application. As I said, there are many things that cause us to be not feel complete, not feel whole. And really the highest answer, the best solution, the ultimate solution is just to stand up and walk out of it on the word of Jesus. I've talked to people with all kinds of difficulties. I talked to a person one time that had a weight problem. That was, overweight, not in a minor way, but in a way that they felt incomplete, and it was troubling to them. And my, what I said to this person was, what if God could, by a miraculous intervention, what if God could suddenly zap you with a magic wand, and suddenly you could have the appearance that you want? You would be at your ideal weight and your ideal appearance. What if God could suddenly just miraculously change you into the image that you want to have for yourself? What if he could do that? Could you maintain it? I said to this person. And they said, well, I think I could. And I said, that would require to maintain it. It would require you'd have to change some life. You'd have to make some different decisions in your life. Isn't that yes? But I could do it under those conditions. And I said, why don't you just believe you have it and believe you are that, just start living like that. And eventually, your body's going to line up with that. Well, that was too hard. That was too hard. But let me tell you something. That's basically what Jesus is saying here. Just get up, act like it's true, and go on. And immediately the man was made whole. He took up his bed and walked. I don't want to pass by this without saying, again, and reiterating it, the will of Jesus is that we be made whole. He wants us to have happy, whole lives and not incomplete in any area. That's His will for us. And it touches me to read this, to think that He cares so much about us, that He wants our lives to be whole and healed and us not to be incomplete in any area. So the man rose, took up his bed, walked, but the same day was the Sabbath. Same day was the Sabbath. And the Jews therefore said to him that was cured, "It's the Sabbath. It's not lawful for you to carry your bed." And his answer is, he had a good answer. "He that made me whole, the same said, take up your bed and walk." Then they said, "What man is that said unto you, take up your bed and walk?" And he that was healed did not know who it was, for Jesus had conveyed himself away, a multitude being in the place. See, they were troubled because he was carrying that little mat we saw. And the way that the Jews understood the Sabbath was, you're not supposed to do any work, you're not supposed to do anything on the Sabbath day. But may I say to you something that's interesting? I don't know if you've ever thought about this or not. If you read the Gospels, if you read about Jesus' miracles, His biggest and His most mighty and His most important miracles, He did them all on the Sabbath day. Isn't that interesting? He did all of His works, all of His mightiest miracles on the Sabbath day. And really, what is the Sabbath day? The Sabbath day is the day when man is supposed to rest. And can I say, Jesus said, my Father's always at work. The Sabbath, what it represents is when we quit and God takes over. That's what it really means. The Sabbath is when we stop and then God does it. You see, God is working, and so that's why Jesus, I think, does all these things on the Sabbath. But he says, I don't know who it was. Jesus had conveyed himself away, verse 14. Afterward, Jesus finds him in the temple, and he said, "Behold, thou art made whole. Sin no more, lest a worse thing come upon thee." Now, this man has had an encounter with Jesus. First of all, he didn't know who he was, first of all. And now Jesus said, you're made whole. Then he says, "Sin no more, lest a worse thing come upon thee." I think what he means by that, I think what he's saying to him is, you were crippled and you had a physical infirmity and you're sitting by that pool. But there's something worse that can befall a person. There's something worse than being crippled in this life. There's something worse, in other words, in the afterlife. That you need not only to be made whole physically, but morally and spiritually as well. At this point, he didn't know who Jesus was. Although Jesus had blessed him with this miracle, he didn't know. The text says he didn't know who it was. I think sometimes we've taken this verse and run it and established a lot of doctrinal ideas that aren't really correct. And I've heard people say a lot of times, well, if you do anything wrong, if you commit a sin, you've opened the door and the devil comes in and he can do anything he wants in your life. That's really not what Jesus is saying here, I don't think. All that does is make a person think, what's wrong with me? What did I do wrong? And that kind of thinking also cripples you and hinders you from believing God. I think all Jesus is saying here is, listen, don't go back to an old kind of life. Continue with me in a new life, because there's worse things that can happen to a person than physical things. You don't want to end up in a bad place in the afterlife. That's what he's saying. The man departed, told the Jews, "Now I know who it was. It was Jesus who made me whole." Therefore the Jews persecuted Jesus and sought to slay him because he had done these things on the Sabbath day. It's such an interesting thing that they're so religiously minded about the Sabbath, they're willing to kill somebody over the Sabbath. Now that's a little bit too religious for me. If you're willing to kill somebody over your doctrinal position, that ought to be a clue, like a red flag. Something's wrong here. I don't agree with him doctrinally, so I'm going to kill him. Now something's wrong with that. Something's wrong with that thinking. But Jesus, notice what he says in verse 17. Here's his answer. "Why did you do this, Jesus, on the Sabbath day? My Father works, and so I work." In other words, God wanted to do this, so that's what I want to do too. And therefore the Jews sought the more to kill him, even doubly wanted to kill him, not only because he had broken the Sabbath in their eyes, but said that God was his Father in their eyes, making himself equal with God. Well, so be it then. That was the case.